Last week, Bob Dylan released this song called Rocks and Gravel Solid Road, which is a part of the new like bootleg series installment, which if you're not familiar with Bob Dylan, he's been doing this thing called the bootleg series where it's essentially like unreleased material that was recorded but never put out on anything, or it's like live recordings or demos or whatnot. So I really like this Rocks and Gravel Solid Road song, but it made me think of his song I Was Young When I Left Home, which is a song that I discovered. I probably found it through, there's the No Direction Home documentary, and it's in that documentary and it's on the soundtrack on Spotify for that documentary. But I remember finding that song several years ago and just like listening to it on repeat a lot. And just like it's like a demo. It's like, so before he had hitchhiked to New York City, he was like attending University of Minnesota and living in a frat house. So he's basically like, it's weird to think about Bob Dylan in a frat house, because like there's from that point on, he like lied about his childhood. He said that he traveled with the carnival, and he kind of like created this like legend about himself, which I feel like Bob, like I'm on a first name basis with him, which I feel like Dylan is known for doing. So it's during that time when he's living in a frat house that he actually discovers folk music, which again, it's crazy to think about, like the iconic, legendary Bob Dylan living in a frat house. But he goes over to some friend's house, and this guy has a bunch of folk albums, and he discovers Woody Guthrie, gets obsessed with Woody Guthrie, and kind of gets obsessed with folk music. And this song, I Was Young When I Left Home, was a demo that he recorded during that time. And it's got this like super tape warped guitar that is like kind of like beat up and distorted, and then his voice is like this young kid, but he sounds super old, and it's like the first hints of like what became Bob Dylan. And in the tradition of the folk genre, he kind of like amalgamized this song from a bunch of different songs, which in this book, it's called Keys to the Rain. It's the definitive Bob Dylan encyclopedia, and it's got like literally every song he ever wrote. And let's see what it says about I Was Young When I Left Home. On its sole surviving December 1961 Minneapolis recording, Dylan sings like an escaped convict, riding the rails out of town. I Was Young When I Left Home is one of his earliest compositions and an important stepping stone evidencing his ability to transform elements of old blues and folk songs into something he could begin to call his own. The song has hints of traditional 900 Miles, Robert Johnson's Walkin' Blues, and a score of other pre-war blues songs, and Bobby Bare's Detroit City. It's like one of his first songs that he wrote, and it's like him kind of pulling it from other songs, which is like him diving into the folk tradition, which is the past. It's like stories of the past written for new generations, and then sort of like they take on new life as they get re-recorded and then rewrote. And it's interesting to think about now, because we think about like you think about the Ed Sheeran lawsuit where like he got sued for like, I don't know, tons of money for allegedly copying some song. I don't even know who it was by, but the point is like that was part of the culture with folk music. It was like, take this and rewrite it and make it your own. And like it kind of sounds like you can hear him like detaching himself from his childhood and like his roots in that place. And it's all kind of like rooted in the past, which again, like the theme of the past with folk songs. It's like, when I left home, I never wrote a letter. I used to tell my mom. And I was reading, it was interesting. Like when I was writing this piece this week, I was looking for this quote that is actually not a real quote, but it was like about destiny. It's like when you feel something about your destiny, but it's like, there is a good quote about Dylan about destiny, and I used that in the Dylan video, but anyways, I tried to find this one quote, and it was a fake quote that I just found on the internet like 10 years ago. And I came across this Rolling Stone interview from 1978, which I'll put in the link, or I'll link in the description because it's super, super interesting. But he starts talking about the past. Like, essentially the interview is about Ronaldo and Clara, the movie that he made. I think it was around the time of the Rolling Thunder review tour. And this movie is like 4 hours long, and it's like surrealist. I've actually not watched it. I need to watch it. But the guy's asking him about the movie. He's like talking about some specific scene where Tangled Up in Blue starts playing, and which is on Blood on the Tracks, which if you haven't listened to Blood on the Tracks, please listen to Blood on the Tracks. It's like about his divorce with Sarah Dillon. But he says, the interview asks him about Tangled Up in Blue, which is in part about what has happened into the past. And then Dylan's reply is, but we're only dealing with the past in terms of being able to be healed by it. And then he goes on this rant about like, this is what he says. He says, we can communicate only because we both agree that this is a glass, this is a bowl, and that's a candle. And there's a window here, and the lights are out in the city. And I might not agree with that. Turn this glass around and it's something else. Now I'm hiding in a napkin. Watch it now. You don't even know it's there. It's the past. I don't even deal with it. He says, I don't think seriously about the past, the present, or the future. And then he says, I've spent enough time thinking about these things and have gotten nowhere. When he's talking about we can communicate only because we agree that this is a glass and this is a bowl and that's a candle, it reminded me of this book, Mindfulness, by Ellen Langer. And they did these experiments where they gave two groups the same items. So like a hair dryer, an extension cord, and a chew toy. And for the first group, they told them that these are what these things are. They said this is a dog's chew toy. For the second group, they said it could be a chew toy, a hair dryer, an extension cord, or whatever. And then they made this announcement that was like, we made some errors on the form, but we don't have any erasers. She says they created an urgent need for an eraser to correct our mistake. And then she says, since the dog's chew toy was an unfamiliar looking piece of rubber, it fit the bill very nicely. However, only those subjects introduced to the toy conditionally thought to use it in this novel way. So basically what she's saying is she gave the first group this kind of like unconditional way that this is used. So like this is used as a chew toy, as a hairdryer, as an extension cord. For the second group, she gave them kind of a conditional way to view things, which is like, it could be this. It could be a dog's chew toy. So, but that tiny difference in the way that it was explained totally changed their ability to interact with the world, and it totally changed how they were able to solve this problem during the study. That's kind of the sense that I get from Dylan here, is like he was a very conditional person. The context of the song could be taken in many different ways. The context of the movie could be taken in many different ways. The interesting piece of this is him saying that he's dealing with the past only in terms of being able to be healed by it. The way that he's viewing the past is like, this could have been a disaster. Like, it's not that it was a disaster. You know, like in Blood on the Tracks, he's talking about the breakup of his wife. And this is what the guy's referencing in this question, is talking about Tangled Up in Blue. And he says, which is a part about what has happened in the past. And he says, I'm only dealing with the past in terms of being able to be healed by it. Honestly, it kind of gets to the root of like folk music, where it's like, it's a constant changing, constant like reevaluation, constant like reinterpretation of events. And this is like a constant theme throughout Dylan's music. For the same reason, he doesn't play his songs the same way live more than once. Like, it's always new. He's always reinterpreting them. And so it's just kind of, again, it's like he views the world in a very conditional way, which is like a very kind of mindful and like artistic way to view the world. And that's part of the reason I really like Bob Dylan, is because it's like he didn't view the world in an unconditional way. Like, he viewed the world in a conditional way where you're able to apply meaning. Like, it's like you're not getting fed the stuff. Like, you're the one putting the meaning onto it. And I think that is a very, it's mindful, you know, but it's also like empowering, and it's deep. Like, you can go deep. You can sort of like figure new things out in that and kind of make your own path. And it's a very like, you know, trailblazer way to view the world. And I think that's why Dylan is who he is. So yeah, all of that to say, I Was Young When I Left Home was on repeat last week, and I really like that song. And it's one of the Dylan songs that I'm able to like put on repeat for a long time. And honestly, like when I like don't know what to listen to, I usually go to Bob Dylan. And I think maybe for this reason, because it's like there is so much different stuff, and there's stuff that I'm like waiting to listen to. Like Love and Theft, I've not really listened to, and that's been popping up recently, so I'll probably listen to that soon. But yeah, also Timothy Chalamet. If you haven't seen the A Complete Unknown movie, really good. And Chalamet plays this song in one of the first scenes of that movie, and I think he does a good job. Another song I was listening to this week is this song Mystery by Turnstile, and specifically the version with this like jazz hip hop group Bad Bad Not Good. It's kind of this like lo-fi version of their song, which like I grew up in East Texas, and I was in this band as a kid with my brother and a couple of our friends, and it was like this hard, like super hardcore music. Like the lead singer was screaming, I was singing and playing guitar, and then we had a bassist and a drummer and like other friends who came in and out. But out of all the bands that we listened to during that time in like the 2010s hardcore era, Turnstile is probably like had the most mainstream success. Like they just did an NPR Tiny Desk. They've been on like Jimmy Fallon. They're Grammy nominated. Like just sort of like skyrocketed in terms of, especially in terms of like the 2010s hardcore scene. And I really like their album Glow On, which came out 2021. It was kind of their first album of this different sound that they formed, which like, again, before it was kind of hardcore, like some screaming, some like breakdowns and whatnot. And then now it's like, they worked with this producer, Mike Elizondo, who is basically like a protege of Dr. Dre. So it's like, he kind of helped them form this new sound. It's like dreamy pop mixed with like hardcore. And I was in Brooklyn in June, and I literally saw them play Under This Bridge. It was like one of the first songs they played for this new album. And it was incredible, and it reminded me of like the 2010s hardcore scene. It was just like, there was like 10,000 people there, and everybody was moshing. It was like the whole crowd was a mosh pit. So yeah, I was listening to the version of a song from Glow On called Mystery that they did with Bad Bad Not Good this past week. And yeah, it's like lo-fi, kind of like easy listening sort of stuff, which is, it's cool because there's generally like, it's hardcore. Like there's still a lot of hardcore influence in their music, but this project is kind of widely appealing. And I think that's what they've done a good job of, is like making their music more widely appealing than some of the other bands in the space have. So yeah, and their new album Never Enough is really good. I Care, Seeing Stars, and then the title track Never Enough is really good. So yeah, I was listening to that this week. Another song I listened to this week was Tearing Up My Heart by NSYNC, which maybe a hot take, maybe from left field for some of you, but one of my most vivid memories as a kid was watching the Vortex CD of No Strings Attached like spin in my red and yellow and blue CD player. And yeah, I was kind of obsessed as like a 6-year-old with NSYNC. I remember watching the live DVD a bunch of times, and I don't know why. I mean, I think like part of what as an adult I've realized is like Max Martin, who is this, he's kind of written every pop song ever, was the writer and producer for most of these songs. And he kind of has this style, like he did like Britney Spears, Backstreet Boys, like in the early 2000s, late 90s, and kind of carved out that sound. And the reason I was listening to it is because I was working on a song, and part of the song reminds me of Tearing Up My Heart, but then also I'm listening to the production on that song, which is very interesting. It's got this like MPC color, which is this tool that they were using at the time and it's still around. It's like a production tool, like where they have all the pads and you can hit the pads and whatnot. But the color that you get from this when you produce through it is like very unique. So I was listening to it for that reason more than anything. But I mean, the melodies are great. You know, you can't argue with the melodies. And then like the way they stack the vocals is great. And again, it's like a lot of it's in mono. Like a lot of the vocals are in mono, and all the beat and rhythm and production is in mono, which like it's not on both sides. It's just like you can only hear it in the middle. And so I was kind of listening to that as inspiration as I'm working on a song. Yeah, it's kind of like embedded in my DNA, for better or worse. And the last song that I'll talk about that I was listening to last week, I was scrolling Instagram and I came across this video of this guy Hudson Freeman, like doing this weird kind of like the hashtag was like swagcore, and it's like him in a field with this nylon guitar, and he's like bending the string. I haven't learned. I should learn the riff, but the riff was like Billy Strings commented, and like a bunch of guitarists were like freaking out about this riff. But I thought it was cool. I listened to it. It reminds me of like Phoebe Bridgers and like Noah Gunderson, if you know who they are. Kind of like indie singer-songwriter vibe, like sad folk music, you know, which I like went through like a huge era of, and still is rearing its head, obviously. But a cool thing that he did was like he released the version of the song that he recorded in the video in the cornfield as a single on Spotify versus like recording a proper recording of it. He released the demo, like he labeled it a demo. So I thought that was cool, and I just you know, always interesting to see how artists are kind of like getting attention and kind of getting their name out there. And this kid is just like in a field and playing a cool riff, and it like struck a chord with a lot of people, and I think that's cool. So yeah, that's what I listened to this week. Let me know what you think of this format. I'm trying to decide if it's better to do one bit of this, like if I was just to do the Bob Dylan and then like frame the video around that, or if it's cool if I just do like the podcast talking vibe. I kind of like the podcast talking vibe, and then I need to put more attention into doing the longer videos, like the more in-depth videos, like the essays. But yeah, it's kind of fun to just talk. I need to record these before I publish the newsletter, because like even in this, like I like the mindfulness reference and then like the Mike Elizondo reference with Turnstile, I didn't put in the newsletter. So I need to do these before. It's just like a time thing. But yeah, I hope that you listen to some good music this week. I've got a new song coming out soon. I just got the mix back today from my buddy David, who is in Korea, and he's like a freaking mastermind. So sent some notes on that. Hope you have a good week. Peace.